Welcome to CEOs of the Industry, where we dive deep into the minds shaping the future of pork production. I'm your host, Jim Eady, joined today by Dr. Christian Gutierrez from SIVA. In this episode, we're excited to welcome Dr. Jay Miller from the Maschhoffs, one of North America's leading pork production companies. Let's get right to it.
Pleasure having you, Jay. I'm looking forward here to get to know you better and through you some of the insights and the challenges for the Maschhoffs operation. So allow me to start with your journey into this role as CEO of the Maschhoffs. You spent over a decade as a consultant before stepping into this role over a year ago. How did that experience shape your perspective and your approach to becoming CEO of the Maschhoffs?
Yeah, I've been blessed. I mean, I started out as a swine veterinarian early in my career and got exposure to the Maschhoffs through Dr. Jim Lowe and doing just some consulting work as a young swine veterinarian. The Maschhoffs were starting their journey of growth. They needed resources from the outside to help them. And so in 2002, I got the opportunity to start with some breed projects and doing some health work. And as many people know, through that time frame, there was a rapid growth, and so the consulting work continued for a period of almost 16 years before I became a full-time employee. And during that time frame, it was very essential to watch them grow, but also the industry growth as well. And so, when I turned to be a full-time employee, I was blessed to have the history of the Maschhoffs, not through the lens of an employee, but as a consultant. Now, obviously, as a consultant, there's less responsibility. It's kind of a really nice opportunity to give advice and follow up. But I also felt like I become a pretty good partner to them early on. And I always said that, if you do something right, you tend to get to do it again and again with the Maschhoffs, and that's pretty typical of the system. And so during the growth phase of the Maschhoffs, boy, I wore a lot of different hats that did include being a veterinarian through that time frame, and was blessed to put myself around a lot of key leaders in this organization plus the industry. But at the same time, I always said my day job was as a swine consultant. I sit across the table from many, many, many family farmers, grain operations, livestock operations, and help them navigate their swine operation as well. And, fortunately or unfortunately, during that time frame, there was a lot of times I was consulting them to sell the sows and build wean to market barns to, make them active in the swine industry, but also continue to preserve the row crop operation. And so to me, that business acumen that I learned working with family farms, I got to bring that to the Maschhoffs. And it just was a ton of experience that, I don't think a lot of others would have that opportunity. So, to me, my external influence, bring it internally was just a huge benefit to my roles that I've played as a full-time employee.
So you had the insights as an external, you also had the report, but then becoming the CEO, you had to penetrate all layers of the organization and build trust. Can you give us some insight in terms of how you went about accomplishing that?
Yeah, then as you become an employee, now that consultant role switches to now you're accountable. And so, I spent a, fair amount of time. I would say trust was easy to build around here. I mean, when you build an organization with good people, intelligent people, it's actually really easy to build trust. And as you roll up your sleeves and become part of the team, it's a very welcoming organization. And I would say that, building the trust was the easy part. Maintaining it and being accountable for your actions is something that there's a high standard of measurement around here, as many people would know. And so, you don't get a pass around the Maschhoffs. You don't get to pass the buck. I mean, a lot of times, we are very, quick to find, solutions for problems, but we also want to make sure that, you're accountable for your actions. And then, being a consultant, honestly, I didn't have to truly be accountable. The only time I was accountable is whether or not they hired you back or not. And now you sit in that role. I mean, you truly take responsibility for your actions and the outcomes, and whether or not it'll be something that'll be sustainable for the organization. So yeah, it did. It's a role was a role changing model for myself.
Very interesting. So owning it, being the example of accountability among your peers and working next to them. Great insights. Let's switch one gear here and talk about leading a legacy brand in the times that we are living and pushing it forward. So the Maschhoffs is a name that we all recognize, a multi-generational name in pork production. How are you balancing honoring that legacy with pushing the envelope and making change?
Yeah, and I'm going to back up and kind of go through my early career because during that consulting time frame, you want to talk about legacy. I mean, I have just been blessed to be raised in Central Illinois in a livestock community. And as early on in high school, I'll go through a list of names in Illinois that are just legacy producers that I actually got to work with or work for physically. And started in high school working for the Conradi family in Central Illinois. They had a lot of different Conradis, a lot of different families, but a lot of them were in pork production. I got to transfer to the Gilball family, who actually, when I graduated high school, I had no plans to go to college. Mr. Gilball called my ag advisor, called the local college, and forced me that if I was going to work there, I needed to go to college. And so, just another legacy producer in Illinois that guided me. I got exposure to the Whitehooner family, which are actually neighbors of my family. I got exposed to the Brower family in Central Illinois. And then, to top it off, I got exposure to the Maschhoff family. And so if you look at the history of Illinois and pork production, at a very young high school / college career, I got exposure to them. The other one is the Jekyll family. The Jekyll family was actually clients of mine, and I got double exposure there because they grew for the Maschhoffs at one point. And so when you talk about legacy in Illinois, I just listed some names of some people that would many people would know in Illinois. The fun part with that, and one of my most memorable moments with Wayne Maschhoff was visiting with him about those people. Wayne knew them all. He when he rode to Moline, he rode with Fritz Whitehooner. Fritz was family friends with my grandmother, my great grandmother. And so just sitting back and talking with Wayne during that time frame, there was just a lot of history that, I'm not sure anybody else will get or know anybody else will get that exposure. And so you look at how all that those legacy operations have transitioned over the last 20, 30, 40, even 50 years. And you start looking at the industry of where it's going and where it's been. And so one of the things is you'll hear as we go through is, I'll talk about, change and sustainable results. And so here I am, never in my ever wildest dream thought I'd be leading the Maschhoffs, again, a legacy brand, and how do I navigate, through the next generation of the Maschhoffs. Obviously, Dave and Ken, Julie and Karen are the owners of the organization, and they're still very actively involved. But honestly, they are starting to try. I shouldn't say try. They actually are building a structure for this to be a legacy building for business for multiple generations, and that's hats off to the family of putting all that resources and efforts forward. So, how do I push change? Within the pork segment of what the family has in their portfolio, it's actually fairly easy. Our mission is to be, constantly improving our business, but under a system that we're going to manage how we change it. I'm very proud of our leadership team. One of the things we've done here recently is I don't want to say we're trying to be boring, but we're trying to minimize change and making sure that the changes we put forward are based on good science, based on, they're practical for our people. And at the end of the day, they got to have a return for their investment. So honestly, change is always hard, but within the Maschhoff is pretty normal and has a system in place to allow us to, those changes to come forward. And so I'll finish by saying is I honestly think watching those legacy producers and them, some are not in business today, some have changed, but watching that tremendous history that I got exposed to has helped me, again, forge the leadership team and the family and the changes that occur here at the Maschhoffs.
Thank you.
Well, Jay, it's great to connect through this forum here. Some of the things you talked about, like navigating contraction and refocusing the company. You guys went through a little bit of a reduction. What was the mindset behind that decision, and how did you maintain the internal alignment?
Yeah, this was extremely challenging. This was having that ability to step away from your own business and look at the industry and, where the family was. What were you going to predict as where the industry was going, and then really looking at yourself in the mirror and saying, "Hey, well, who are we and where do we play in this industry?" I think one of the key things that I've already mentioned is the family wanted to diversify their legacy. I think they were, 90% of their portfolio was in the pork business, and there was a push that, hey, with a single digit returns or zero returns for a period of time, for the challenges we have in front of us with our asset base, being across, 7, 8, 9 states in the U.S. How do we get our hands wrapped around this? And so there was a diversification and a rationalization play put in place. And I'll be honest, I was blessed to be involved in the initiation of that. But obviously, I'm reaping the rewards on the backside of it more than I was the leader of that. So, previously, many people know Dr. Walter and the previous CEO, but it was a full team, the executive team here at the Maschhoffs, sitting down and really being candid with ourselves of what this business really needed to be to get through multiple generations and, be in an industry that you start questioning, what is the true returns? Because they were, single digits or if not negative. So with that, it also brought opportunity. We basically went through all of our asset base. When I say assets, I include our people. So we decided that hey, what was the best top tier key performing assets in the organization, and we laid out a plan to really drive the company to a top tier return, along with building a team of people to allow us to do that. And so it's not been fun. There's been some times where we said goodbye to our family members. That's been extremely difficult. But we also, promoted it's what's best for everybody, because, you know, things could happen that none of the family members or team members on our teams would be successful if we didn't make some hard decisions during that time frame. Um, so as we did downsize the company, we looked for very strategic opportunities to move our physical assets off, to other producers that we thought were better key areas that, matched their organization. We really studied some of our input costs, transport costs. Hey, where are those pigs going to market? Honestly, we really look for an efficiency model. In that time frame too, is we got to pick, we got to select some of the best leadership in the organization too to navigate that and help us lead through getting us to a more efficient model.
So during this time, Jay, are there any lessons you'd share with other leaders? And then was there a turning point where you knew the organization was beginning to recover culturally or financially?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you got to have that plan. Um, One of the things we did is we started out with an asset plan, but realize in a physical asset, the barns, the sow farms. We own all of our sow farms. We're down to maybe not owning one of the 36, 37 that we have now. But putting the plan together and then putting the team around it to truly execute it. And that wasn't with lighthearted. That was extremely difficult at times when you bring usually the second layer of leadership in and really explain to them that this is what's best for the industry, this is what's best for the family, this is what's best for our business. And it was very kind of a low in our organization, when we moved roughly 100,000 sows out, and the resources and people that we had to go with it. Now, since then, one of the things we did in that is we reached very deep into our own organization and culture, and really redefined our why. And so, there's a book out there by Simon Sinek, and it's one of my favorite books. It's Truly Finding Your Why. So in that time frame, I mean, we took that opportunity to really to redefine our purpose here at the Maschhoffs. And I think that's key too, is being forthfront with who you are and defining your purpose. And again, as we go through here today, that's one of my favorite things to talk about, is this cultural transition that we've went through.
So as we talk about a cultural transition, I would say culture and people as the foundation for performance, Jay. So you've emphasized that as a driver of business results. What did the transformation look like, and how do you measure its impact?
Yeah, and again, this would be my favorite part to talk about, is the people. So, I've always been a believer you can put a strategy together, and you can put assets together, you can put technology together, but one of the key things we always forget about is the people. And so through this journey, one of the things we set out to do is make sure, we knew what we needed to go accomplish. And so we set out by saying, well, that's fine, but why are we going to go out and accomplish it? And so we really did take a step back. You talk about a mission or vision, and sometimes people get confused even how to define the words, but I think very clearly is, what is your purpose? What is your why? And so the executive team, we brought in roughly probably 20 of the top leaders, and we asked them. And so we flipped this thing on its head. We made it a bottoms up type rebuild. They come up with the feeding families and building communities, not us. That group of 20 leaders also, we had some stakes in the sand that we wanted for our strategic objectives, but we let them build it as well. And so through this transformation, we come out of there with a redefined purpose and our strategic objectives that we wanted to go out and accomplish. And it came from within the organization. It was not a top-down push. Those strategic objectives, we're not ashamed of them at all. I mean, we're not a 501c. We're not a nonprofit business. We're very proud that we're in business for profit. And I don't think anybody in the industry needs to be ashamed of that. And so we're very proud that we're a for-profit business. I think the other one is, we knew we needed to engage our people. Um, there's a segment out there in Simon Sinek that talks about, where do you empower the company? We empower it through the people. And so we've spent a tremendous amount of time measuring our true engagement. We do it through a survey that we've conducted over the last 10 to 15 years with our team members. And we've watched those numbers just, climb to a point that, it makes you very excited of what we can do in the future. I think the third strategic objective we put out there is give back to our communities. We want to rebuild I apologize, I don't want to use the word rebuild. We want to, build within our communities where our people work, and in our industry. And so we made a very strong commitment to give, money and resources to these areas of our communities. The other thing with this is within the pork business. The family has granted us the opportunity to allow the pork business to do this. The other thing that's really neat about this is another bottom-up build. So, this starts with people in our barns and our farms. It's from our leadership. They've decided where they want to put it. We've kind of defined the ditches as some big buckets, and we've allowed them to go out and give it. So I think navigating this, the key thing is we defined our purpose, and we set out three strategic objectives for our company to go out and accomplish.
So how do you ensure that cultural values translate from leadership to every barn and the team, Jay?
Yeah, it's tough, and honestly, it's still our battle, right? Is getting that message both pushed down and brought back up, and we're getting there. 2 years in, I would tell you of really communicating the message, and I feel like we're just continuing to gain and gain and gain. Obviously, multiple ways to communicate today, whether it's an email, whether it's um, uh, a text message, whether it's our favorite today is probably our TML TV. So we have our own um, slide deck, I guess is what I would call it. But we broadcast it in every one of our farms, our break rooms, and through that, you continuing to see the message brought out. And I think the other one is our social media platform as well. Our communications department really, and one of our business initiatives was making sure we understand how to communicate with it internally and externally to the organization. And so, very proud to say that we are getting our message, we are getting our culture, throughout the entire organization. And I sense even the industry is picked up that things are a little different around here.
And how do you hold leadership accountable for actually living the culture and not just talking about it?
Yeah, great question. And I'll give you an example of just last week. A leader stepped in my office, and he had a concern of another leader talking, had concerns, and my pushback was, hey, did you take the time to put those two people together and let them work it out? What I mean by that is no stone gets unturned. One of the things we like to do is not don't bring problems, bring solutions. Don't attack the people, attack the system. And so those are the things we continue to drive and push. Um, Here recently, we've talked about a mindset that you have to do what's right. And you don't do what's right when people are looking, but you do what's right no matter what. Do hard things. I mean, these are all the things that we continue to push through our leadership that, it's not acceptable to not be top tier. It's not acceptable to walk by something that doesn't belong in its place. We've set a standard, typical Maschhoff fashion. It's extremely high, high standard, and we just continue to drive that through our leadership team all the way through, from the top, to the barn. I think one of the things we do is we build a structure around communication as well. Or, I'm sorry, about our organizational with our meetings. So we have a quarterly business meeting that's been just, I think, instrumental in getting this information out there. We bring our department heads into a quarterly meeting every year, face to face. It's not streamed on any Teams meeting or anything. It is truly a traditional, all departments must be here type meeting. And that has just been a little bit different than what a lot of others have done. We've used Teams or Zoom or remote, and honestly bringing people back together in the office on a quarterly basis and having them report out what's going on in their departments. That has brought business results, but it continues to strengthen the culture of the organization as well.
Well, I love the cultural values you've brought into the Maschhoffs, Jay. Let's transition a little bit to veterinary leadership at the executive level. So you come from a veterinary background. How does the scientific and health-focused mindset influence the business leadership?
Yeah, again, I've been blessed to be exposed to a tremendous amount of veterinary leadership, from the Paul Yeskis, the Joe Connors, the Tim Lulas, you can go down the list, the Scott D's, there's just so many different of my peers out there that I've gotten a chance to interact with and exposed to on the veterinarian side. And so continue to, those are my peers, and exchange information with them is on the health side. And then I think one of the things that, again, that I talked about is, my background of the business acumen, brought that forward, from my consulting career into the organization. And then, you look at, the Maschhoff and their scientific model, the strong animal science PhD background of the research departments that we have here. And so as a veterinary leader, but also with a business acumen and with the Maschhoffs, I think it's the perfect chemistry to allow me to use all three of those buckets to drive decisions at the executive level. Um, One thing about the infrastructure we've built around here is we have a very robust R&D platform that we still operate today that was very difficult as we downsized the organization, is how do we right size the R&D program? We had a genetics business that we needed 300 plus sows to make that work. And as we downsized, we needed to, move those resources to somebody else. And so I do think that, one, being a veterinarian at the executive level with those experiences that I had and the resources I have within is really just, continue to fuel my success here at the Maschhoffs.
So do you think the industry benefits when more executives have that operational animal first perspective, Jim?
Yeah, they do. And we can talk about the next generation of leaders that come through, right? Because it's, one of the concerns we always have is, do these people truly have animal, you know, perspective firsthand? I've been blessed to be raised in the livestock industry. My children have been raised in the livestock industry. We're very advocate of the industry, the beef industry as well. We raise beef cattle at home. My kids show cattle. And then as they navigate their careers, some have been in agriculture and some are not. But I would, like to think that, do they have to have those animal experiences? No, I don't think they do. Are they sure beneficial of just understanding basic husbandry of animals? Absolutely. I think that is a benefit, but it's not absolutely mandatory that, somebody possesses that.
So when we talk about building a sustainable modern pork company, what does sustainable results mean to you, not just environmentally, but operationally and culturally?
Yeah, this is another one that hits home for me because I'm a big systems guy. What I mean by that is, really defining, we can talk about defining purpose or strategic objective, but you really got to define the system that you have in place. And the system doesn't change unless everybody knows there's going to be a change. And, we're a biological protein company. It has a tremendous amount of uncontrollable risk, uncontrollable events, challenges that are going to occur. Those are not where we need to focus. Where we need to focus on the things that we can control. And so we have spent a tremendous amount of time in the last 2 to 3 years of really focusing on the controllable events and challenges that come at us. Setting ourselves up for success has really been simple. We went back to the basics of starting. We built a people team and a culture that for the people to be successful. And we went back to the basics of raising pigs. That sounds very simple, but it can be more difficult. We went through labor challenges, as many of you know within the industry. We went to a TN program. They're very wonderful people, but we've also not just made them a commodity. We made them part of our culture, and we've adapted to them. So when I look at sustainable and getting sustainable results is understanding there's a well-defined system that we've put in place that we have to operate against, and we measure ourselves by, are we operating the system? The result is the financial return. The result is, the reward at the end. And so, we look at not just the financial result, but we want to look at the metrics that are actually within the system that, how is it operating? So when we look at sustainable results, what we want to get to is a system that, the metrics within the system would tell us that we're executing.
Where do you think the pork industry still needs to catch up when it comes to long-term thinking?
Yeah, this is probably a challenging question for me. We will have challenges ahead of us. You can look at across the other protein sectors, beef and chicken. They have their own challenges as well. Whether it's going to be a foreign animal disease, whether it's going to be another Prop 12, whether it's going to be, the disease-resistant pig. Where do we need to think long term, where do we need to catch up at? I am been extremely impressed with the pork board and understanding that domestic demand is a key factor that we need to do. I think I've said it for many, many years. We got to tell our story. I think it's something we need to be proud of. Not everybody's going to accept our story, and that's okay. This is a free country, and I'm okay with that. But I think more and more people would accept our story, accept our product, would consume our product if they truly knew our story and our families that raised the product. I also think we've got to continue to be innovative in our products. You know, where can we make things more convenient for people? It's amazing to me that the belly sells for more than the loin. I still struggle today that bacon is a huge influence in our culture, and the loin gets left behind, and to me is backwards in value. But that's okay. This is a free country, and that's where our culture has taken it to today. So I think there's plenty of things that we can work on as an industry, as a business, where and there's lots of opportunities within there to drive more value for our product.
Do you think there's a role with producer education or community alignment in making sustainable practical, not just aspirational results?
I do. One of the things I think we got to do is continue to, invest into the next generation as well. And I know that's one of our questions coming up. And I'm not trying to change our subject here, but we have spent a lot of time in getting our communities and telling our message around, within when we talk about building communities, one of the things is we are doing that very publicly. We want to be actively involved. We want to make sure we give resources to our schools, our county fairgrounds, wherever our people are involved in the community. We want to make sure that we are out there supporting them, but we want our message to be heard. And so one of the things is, physically and actively being involved, of supporting them financially, but making sure they understand our story, what our business is, and where that financial reward is coming from. And so we give that challenge to our impact group. It's called the Maschhoff Impact, of making sure they continue to get our message out there, along with truly delivering the funds that are needed for these projects in our communities.
Jay, you have made a strong point on the mentors you had throughout your career and through your early development in the industry. What is your vision now in the platform you have with the Maschhoffs to attract and develop future talent?
Yeah, and we've been blessed, right? So as we quote downsized, we've been able to, capture the best of the best talent within the organization. And I think to me is, what do we do to maintain that? What do we do to grow that? We've at the Maschhoffs, we have a very active intern program that we participate in. We bring 8 to 10 to 12 college level interns in. And our goal there is not really recruitment, but we want to expose them to the industry and expose ourselves to those universities and out there. So we have the main areas that we have is, one, we're actively involved in a lot of the universities across the country to make sure that we get our name out there, our business model, and then we're looking for talent at all the time. We believe we need a presence in the industry. Several years ago, we made a pitch that we need a tent at World Pork Expo. Well, why does the Maschhoffs need a tent at World Pork Expo? Our idea was, hey, you know what? We're part of the industry. We want to brand ourselves. We want people to understand our story. We want people to enjoy, if they work for us and need a spot, to enjoy it. And we want to really, truly, people to understand who we are and our culture. Recently, we made a visit, and one of the conversations was about college football teams sharing their playbook. And some people would say, well, why would you share your playbook? And I think the concept there is, we're willing to share our playbook at the Maschhoffs. We just would challenge others. Can you execute our playbook? And I think that's key. It doesn't matter, what the play is. It's whether or not you have the talent, the system, the culture that would go with it. And so when we looked at, how do we continue to get the culture within, is where we'd like to develop our leaders. And then, as we move through the next generations, we'd like to sit back and say, well, there's nobody that can do my job. I'm not a believer of that. I'm a believer there'll be somebody that'll come behind me that'll do my job just fine. Absolutely, they are going to think differently. I've raised three young adults myself. They're all out of college now, and they do not think like I do. And I would tell you that when they sit across the table with their peers, I'm sure they're not going to quite think like we do, and that's okay. I've come to accept that, this next generation probably are smarter than we are. They have more tools, more resources than any of us have had, and I'm very well convinced they will figure it out, and they will lead these organizations, just as good as we did.
What advice would you give to a young veterinarian or a young ag student considering a path in our industry? And specifically, what would you point them to become leaders within the space?
Yeah, a lot of it's experience, right? I look back at how did I get to where I get? I mean, one of the things we have here is what we call a targeted development program for our leadership team. And as we've gotten into it, one of the things I am challenged with now as it matures is, what's the next layer in that target development program. One of the things is I've tried to write on the board in my office here is what do I want to tell young people that I know today that I didn't know then. And I would tell you that the biggest thing is you got to get out there. You got to communicate. You got to get exposure to these other organizations. You've got to and not just the pork industry, but all the ag industry, the row crop, the other proteins. Is understanding that the entire ag community is extremely important. I think the other thing is they've got to take some risk. They have to sign up for those interns. They've got to get, visiting. They've got to pick up the phone and call. They got to send that email. And so my biggest thing with the young veterinarians and the young ag students out there is, you've got to take a risk to connect and communicate with these organizations within the industry. And you'll find a spot if you have a desire. I always tell our interns, this is their opportunity and responsibility to ask all the questions. This is a place where you get to make mistakes and you're not held accountable. You don't have a full-time job. And so I just challenge any student out there that wants to be in our industries, just keep asking questions. You'll find a spot.
Very solid. Get exposed, take risk. Now, let's look ahead and get into your vision for the next 5 years. What can you share with us about your strategic focus for the Maschhoffs?
Yeah, that my team would probably laugh at me. One of the things I really tried to do is like when I came into the organization, as I told them, I wanted to be boring. I really wanted to redefine our systems. I wanted them to operate. I tried to keep a lot of the noise away of whether or not it's purchasing or selling an asset. And we did really good for 1 year. And then we've had to regroup here as we've had some transitions in terms of transactions, all for the good. The Maschhoffs will always look at opportunities that come in front of us. We are probably not near as aggressive as we were in the past. We want them to fit our system. We want our farms to be closer to our own feed mills. We want to transport our own pigs. So when we look at our business structure, our system, so we will look at opportunities that come that'll fit our system. So over the next 5 years, what I would really like to see happen is continue to make that our system more efficient, moving pigs closer to our mills, moving pigs closer to our customer plants. We know there's disease challenges across the United States. We've tried to position our sow farms, away from some of those areas. We feel very confident of where we've put our sow base. We continue to look at our finishing base across the U.S. of where it needs to be. Obviously, it needs to be closest to feed, and the second place is closer to plant. And so, as we look at the number of miles we have on a lot of our pigs, we are continuing to sharpen the pencil. I think one of the scariest things to me that's within our organization is the cost of capital improvements. We are continuing to watch our assets age, especially the grow finish portion of it. And then you look at the cost to replace that is going to be a huge challenge. And so we've put a initiative together to look at our finishing base and our finishing model. We call it our wean to production strategy. And we continue to sharpen that. Ours is quite different than many in the industry. And so over the next 2 to 3 years, we're really wanting to focus of, hey, what does our finishing strategy look like over the next 5 to 10 to 15 years? Um, we know that we have lots of families. There's, 375 some different families that are definitely dependent on us. And the last thing we'd ever want to do to jeopardize those relationships or jeopardize their financial stability within the industry. So we've got several things to go work on over the next 5 years. I would tell you is we will never give up on that culture of the people and developing those. So between developing our people, spending resources, times, and money towards them, there is some assets that we need to go work on and some wean to market strategy as well.
Very clear. Solid systems driving efficiency towards the P&L. Now, on a more personal note, Jay, what would success look like for you personally, as a leader and as a steward for the Maschhoffs?
Yeah, I have been blessed to be able to sit here. To me, what personally, I want to see the leaders under me step into roles that and push me out. How's that? I want them to be able to, there's several of us here. My CFO, Jeff Deason, and I both, have been blessed to be here for 20 some years. We won't be here forever. We know that. And so our goal is to make the other people underneath of us better. And we have all the confidence in the world that, we internally, we have people that will fill these roles over the next 5 to 7 to 10 years. And so for personal me, success at the Maschhoff is, there is a biological protein company that has a system in place that is getting sustainable results for the family. And there is a culture around here that is people centric. And, that there is a leadership team here that doesn't lose the core values that the family has instilled 30 years ago. And I hope that someday I can look back and look in at the organization and still see those characteristics. Hopefully, when I'm sitting on a porch swing somewhere drinking a cup of coffee.
Very powerful. Thank you for sharing.
So, Jay, we're going to wrap on the Fast Five, a quick hit to show personal perspective and leadership style. So question number one, you answered about the book that shaped thinking. So I'm going to switch that up. Yeah, are you as big as a St. Louis Cardinals fan as Ken and Julie?
I am. So I grew up with I got three brothers, and my dad. And so there's two, I grew up in central Illinois. So I am at the border between Cubs and Cardinals. So there is two Cardinals and two Cub fans in our family, and we are rivals all season long. And I'm a Cardinal fan.
Okay. What do you believe the pork industry underestimates right now?
I think the biggest thing we underestimate is just the power of people. You've heard me say it throughout this, 30-minute spiel here that, just we cannot take the focus off the power of people and empowering them to go out and help us in the organization. I think the other things I mentioned is, there's foreign animal disease. We've got to navigate the disease resistant pig. The next Prop 12. I'm a very adamant believer we have to support our pork board and our NPPC, and those are their avenues out there that help us to do all that. But at the end of the day, I just don't think we can underestimate the value of taking care of people. And if we enhance their lives, they're going to enhance ours.
Best advice you've received as a leader?
Take risk. You got to make a decision. I don't want to say it's the easy part, but in that decision, you need to think about it throughout, but you got to take the risk.
Favorite part of your day-to-day role?
Again, I apologize if I feel like a broken record, but it's the people. I came here. I sold a very successful veterinary practice, and I came here to kind of as a director of health to relax and have fun, and found myself sitting in this role. And I honestly I do it because of the people in the organization.
And three words you'd use to describe the Maschhoffs in 2020.
So in there's a group of like 30 words, right? And so I wasn't quite sure which three to pick here, and so um, I do apologize. I think three words to describe the Maschhoffs in 2025 has got to be people is number one, um, culture would be number two. And I think the best thing for the third word, and it's probably the least important, right, is just success. And you can define that however you want, but in my opinion is, we have been very successful in year of 2025, and it's because of everything else we put together around that.
Well, gentlemen, thanks for a great discussion. Dr. J. Miller, CEOs of the industry.